Caribbean Newsline is brought to you by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc.
The Guyana government and opposition reached consensus on the status quo following last month's no-confidence vote. Our top story in Caribbean Newsline for Wednesday, January 9th from the CMC News Centre in Bridgetown. I'm Dawn Paris. Good evening. President David Granger and opposition leader Barrett Jagdeo have reached a broad agreement on how government will function on the heels of the controversial no-confidence vote last month. Granger made the disclosure after a meeting on Wednesday, which he described as a successful engagement. The two sides met almost 3 weeks after the coalition government lost a vote of no confidence tabled by Jagdeo, when then backbencher Charandas Prasad sided with the opposition to give the People's Progressive Party a 33-32 victory in the motion in the 65-member National Assembly. The government has challenged the validity of the vote on several grounds, including that a 34 majority vote was needed to carry the motion, even as the opposition insists it should resign and call elections by March 21st. After meeting with Jagdeo, President Granger said the two sides had come to an understanding on how the National Assembly and the government should function for now.
Neither of these two important institutions, the legislative branch and the executive branch, could be allowed to fail. Public services have to be delivered, public order has to be maintained, and therefore the two sides reached broad agreement on how these two institutions, the legislative branch and the executive branch, would continue to function.
The other issue discussed at Wednesday's meeting was general and regional elections, which was a priority for Jagdeo heading into the talks. President Granger said even as the government presses ahead with its challenge to the outcome of the no-confidence motion, it will engage the Guyana Elections Commission, GECOM.
The government has had legal recourse to the courts in order to determine the validity of the vote in the National Assembly on the 21st of December. This is quite legitimate, and there's no intention on the part of the government to derail the constitutional or legislative process. We have agreed that the two sides will continue to work together to engage GECOM to ensure that elections are held within the administrative capabilities of the Guyana Elections Commission.
Granger said that both he and the opposition leader are concerned about the current situation and are working to find a solution that the public would be satisfied with. While speaking at a news conference after the meeting, Jagdeo gave more details about their accord. He said since the government is insisting it will not withdraw the challenge to the motion, they will make an appeal to the court to have the case heard expeditiously.
This legal remedy could take forever. That it could take maybe a year, and what happens in the meantime? We would have defeated, first of all, the purpose of the Constitution. It will pursue it. So we then said, why not approach the court to hear these matters continuously as provided for by our laws relating to an expeditious hearing of the matter throughout from every stage of our court, all the way to the CCJ. There were some, and we said that the courts must pay heed to this. This is not a routine matter. This is a constitutional matter that impinges on a timeline.
Jagdeo added that he had agreed with President Granger that the country could not function without a government, but he said the opposition is adamant no major decisions should be made in the meantime.
That our job is not to stymie the functioning of the government. And so where public order is concerned and public services, etc., those have to continue. But we believe that, and we continue to believe that the Parliament must meet only on matters related to the the conduct of elections or any other matter that we agree to, and routine issues. Not to Parliament, but that no new legislation, we made it clear, should be initiated in the National Assembly, and that the government should function more in a routine capacity in its conduct of the affairs of the state.
Meantime, a political activist is calling on the High Court to immediately order the government to resign and call fresh general elections. In an affidavit filed in the court, Christopher Ram says the failure of the cabinet to resign and to fix a date for elections no later than March 21, 2019 has led the country into uncertainty and will lead to a constitutional crisis. He's asking the court to declare that the no-confidence motion which was passed is valid and to force government to step down. Ram's argument is that a constitutional crisis and the uncertainty and instability resulting from it are likely to cause investors to be reluctant to invest in Guyana, and that could have dire consequences for the country. The Jamaica government says it will enact special legislation to allow it to forcibly retake Venezuela's 49% stake in state-owned oil refinery Petrojam. Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith told a news conference on Tuesday that the decision is based on economic and national considerations. She insists it's not political. More in this report from Herman Green of TVJ News.
Ownership of the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica, Petrojam, is currently split between Jamaica and the Venezuelan state-owned oil and natural gas company, PDV Caribe. Jamaica owns the slight majority with 51%. But on Tuesday, Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith announced plans to change that.
The government of Jamaica proposes to take legislative action to retake ownership of the 49% shareholdings in Petrojam currently held by PDV Caribe.
She says the decision follows a long list of failures on the Venezuelans' part. The Venezuelans purchased the 49% stake in 2006 as part of an agreement which was to see the upgrading and expansion of the refinery.
12 years later, Venezuela is also now the subject of U.S. sanctions which create international banking and operating risks for Petrojam and accordingly for Jamaica. 12 years later, the current status of the Petrojam refinery now poses a risk for the economy and for Jamaica.
According to Ms. Johnson-Smith, the failure to fulfill the commitment continued despite another letter of commitment being signed in 2017. She says since then, negotiations for a buyback have been dragging on with no success.
While we have been trying to negotiate an agreement to buy back, the urgency of the matter has increased as geopolitical conditions related to Venezuela have not improved since the issuance of the U.S. executive order in August 2017. The circumstances increase the potential for it to become more difficult, even more difficult for Petrojam to operate, to simply make payments, to purchase supplies, and to use international banking services.
The government argues that these challenges will persist once Venezuela continues to hold a stake in Petrojam and believes that PDV Caribe has no urgent plan to deliver on the upgrades. Hence, the proposed legislative action under the Land Acquisition Act.
What is therefore proposed is a new bill, a new law, which specifically addresses the purchase of this, or rather ownership of the 49% shareholding in Petrojam. It will not be a general piece of legislation which allows for acquisition of property rights other than land beyond the scope of the specific purchase or transfer of ownership of the 49% shares in Petrojam.
But the opposition People's National Party has condemned the move, describing it as a hostile, premature and unwarranted takeover. As we hear again from TVJ News, the opposition spokesman on energy, Philip Paulwell, says it's unnecessary.
Mr. Paulwell said the move was particularly premature given the fact that the ZACA committee, which was appointed to look at the future of the Petrojam refinery, is scheduled to report in May 2019 on its findings and recommendations. He also questioned if attempts were made to use international arbitration organizations to settle negotiation disputes. He argues that the expropriation will cause ripple effects to be felt in the local and international investor community. The statement went on to say that the hostile approach is uncharacteristic of Jamaica and may in fact be detrimental to our future negotiating capacity with other foreign investors. Mr. Polwell has called on Prime Minister Andrew Holness, in his capacity as head of government and as Minister of Energy, to reveal his role in the negotiation as well as the factors which led to this urgent action.
Still to come in Caribbean Newsline, Venezuela and Guyana at loggerheads again. We'll tell you about their latest dispute after the break.
Follow your heart to St. Kitts and make plans to join us at the 23rd Annual St. Kitts Music Festival. 5 days of world-class entertainment from Wednesday, June 26th to Sunday, June 30th, 2019. See Butcher Banton live as he makes his epic return to St. Kitts. Also, French Montana and Davido. Popcorn and the legendary Smokey Robinson. This is just the first wave of announcements. Many more acts to come. For more information, log on to stkitsmusicfestival.net. The St. Kitts Music Festival, an experience like no other.
Venezuela and Guyana are in yet another dispute, this time over whether the Venezuelan Navy vessel that intercepted research ships hired by U.S. oil company ExxonMobil did so in Guyana's waters. Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez says not, and she says she has concrete evidence contradicting Guyana's version of the incident that occurred on December 22nd last year. In his statement to the National Assembly last week, Guyana's Minister of Legal Affairs Carl Greenidge said the two vessels were intercepted by the Venezuelan Navy in the Essequibo. But disputing Guyana's account of what it said was a dangerous incursion into its waters, Rodriguez insisted on Tuesday that the ships had trespassed on waters in Venezuelan territory over which there is no dispute. She showed documentation and played radio communications allegedly recorded by the Venezuelan Navy as it encountered one of the ships, which she said made it clear that the incident did not occur in disputed waters.
We'll give you permission to make activity in this zone.
The Guyanese government, over.
Position now, sir, over.
My present position now is 09 degrees, 16.9 minutes north, 058 degrees, 15.9 minutes west, over.
All right, Captain. To be on maritime jurisdiction water of Venezuela, no Guyanan maritime water. I need you understand this one, okay?
Message is well copied. Message is well copied. We have stopped our operation to safeguard our safety and the security of the crew and the vessel, starting to alter course to port to exit Venezuelan, what you define as Venezuelan territory.
Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has again made it clear that his government is not ruling out the possibility of taking legal action against the Ross University School of Medicine. The offshore medical school announced its departure from Dominica in August last year after 40 years and has relocated to Barbados, where classes began on Monday. In an interview aired on Tuesday evening, Skerrit maintained that Ross should compensate Dominicans who made investments to provide services to the school. We apologize for the lack of audio there. Continuing, several Caribbean countries ended 2018 with a sharp criticism of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, for what they say are unfair demands to amend their tax regimes. The Bahamas, Bermuda, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines are among those blasting the Paris-based organization in recent weeks, even as they passed new laws to comply with the OECD regulations. In this week's Newsline Business, Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit adds his voice to the growing chorus of discontent.
Newsline Business is brought to you by Solar Dynamics.
Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit is the latest regional leader to rebuke the OECD for its continued demands on Caribbean countries to amend their tax regime or face sanctions. Several countries passed legislation late last year to comply with OECD regulations to avoid being blacklisted. But in an interview to Review 2018, Skerrit said the OECD is being unfair.
What the OECD and such international organizations are doing to Dominica and the Caribbean is unfair. The Caribbean, I therefore will speak for the Caribbean, Dominica included, we've always cooperated with the international community on all matters. When we were advised for a study done by the World Bank to diversify our economy in the 90s and introduce the offshore financial services, we went ahead of this. And all of the recommendations and impositions which were placed on the Caribbean, where money laundering is concerned, financial anti-terrorism, our Caribbean region have gone beyond what was demanded of us.
Skerrit's comments come as a delegation from Barbados meets with OECD officials in Paris from January 9 to 11. He says the Caribbean will cooperate with the international organization, but countries must defend their right to sovereignty and self-determination.
We will go ahead before the OECD because they run the world. They will tell us what to do, and we'll have no choice to do it because we need the financial systems to operate, etc. But what they're doing is unfair because a lot of the things that they're asking us to do, they're not doing themselves.
He also said he's disappointed that the region has not adopted a united position on the matter.
We have now to call emergency sittings of parliament in every country in the Caribbean because there is a meeting of the OECD in the last week of December, and we're all trying to get off on this so-called blacklist. And I'm saying to us in the region that we have to unite. This is not about partisan politics. Whoever is in government in these regions, you will have the same challenges.
Skerrit likened the OECD's action to that of colonial masters and maintained that firm action must be taken to protect the Caribbean's interests.
We must say this about the future of our countries and the opportunities which we are seeking to create for our children and for young people who are investing in their education. That, if we don't watch it, we'll have a serious challenge.
Marie-Claire Williams, Newsline Business.
Newsline Business was brought to you by Solar Dynamics.
Shower in the morning, shower in the evening, or take a fresh at night. Enjoy a warm shower with Solar Dynamics, you'll feel alright. Comfort, safety, temperature guaranteed. Long service, fulfilling your every need. Take a shower in comfort and no more upstream water touch you. Solar Dynamics is the best for you. Save on electricity, be environmentally friendly. Solar Dynamics is the one for you.
In Newsline Sport, an audit points to fraud at the Sports Company of Trinidad and Tobago. Stay with us.
your heart to St. Kitts and make plans to join us at the 23rd Annual St. Kitts Music Festival. 5 days of world-class entertainment from Wednesday, June 26th to Sunday, June 30th, 2019. See Buju Banton live as he makes his epic return to St. Kitts. Also, French Montana and Davido. Popcorn and the legendary Smokey Robinson. This is just the first wave of announcements. Many more acts to come. For more information, log on to StKittsMusicFestival.net. The St. Kitts Music Festival, an experience like no other. Over hills and valleys too.
Topping sports this evening, a former director of the sports company of Trinidad and Tobago has been tagged by independent auditors as having made unauthorized transactions with the cricket board in the Twin Island Republic in a bid to get a top coaching job. CNC3's Kamal Georges breaks down the report by PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Former sports company director and a cricket administrator are embroiled in what could be described in cricketing terms as a match-fixing affair. A 14-page forensic investigation by PricewaterhouseCoopers reveals funding for favors and the leaking of sensitive sport company information. Project Barcelona is part of a wider investigation into procurement and expenditure irregularities at the sport company, which saw the termination of several employees last year. This extended investigation examines dozens of unauthorized recordings between Imran Jan, Azim Basrath and 2 other sporting officials. More than 3,000 recordings were found on Jan's company-issued phone after he was terminated. The auditors found that Jan appeared to have been attempting to influence the provision of sport funding to the TTCB of more than $250,000, a sum it says he did not have the authority to approve. But Jan may have been motivated by the promise of a reward by TTCB President Azim Basrath. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, it appears Basrath also informed Jan he was rewarding him in some way for his efforts to secure the funding. Basrath, according to the report, put Jan's name in front. The Sport TT director was subsequently appointed assistant coach for the Red Force in October of 2017. But more alarmingly for Jan, PwC revealed in its report evidence of the former director leaking confidential company information, a potential breach under the Companies Act. Jan shared documents with Basrath which apparently stated how much was paid by Sport TT to the TTCB, something PwC considers an unauthorized action. CNC3 was unable to reach Imran Jan. He did not respond to our calls or text messages. A PwC official confirmed the authenticity of the report. Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi did not confirm nor deny these reports, as he would not comment on matters currently before the courts. Basrath, meanwhile, defended his position, saying he alone, as TTCB president, could not grant positions like assistant head coach without approval of the entire executive. He says he can only remember saying that Imran Jan was a top contender for the post because of his experience. He denies that confidential information was leaked to him. He admits he received information about sporting body allocations, and he disagrees that can be classified as confidential. This news comes days before the TTCB executive elections, which are carded for next Wednesday.
Trinidad and Tobago Red Force captain Dinesh Ramdin has branded his side's batting in both innings as unacceptable after they crashed to a heavy 245-run defeat to Leeward Islands Hurricanes in the regional 4-day competition on Monday. Set 342 to win at the Brian Lara Stadium, Red Force began the final day on 26 without loss, but capitulated quickly for a paltry 96 all-out 15 minutes into an extended first session. They looked in decent shape at 72 for 2, but they lost their 8 wickets for just 24 runs. Speaking with the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday newspaper, Ramdin lamented that, quote, Our bowlers fought hard on that wicket, but losing 6 wickets in a morning session was unacceptable. Then losing all 10 wickets for under 100 runs as a professional unit is not acceptable. Guys have to take more ownership, especially some of the senior guys. Look at Jeremy Solozano. He batted really well. It's for the guys to get starts." End quote. Ramdin, in his first match after returning from Windies duty, urged his batsmen to spend more time at the crease. Red Force travel to Kingston later this week to take on Jamaica Scorpions in their 4th round match at Sabina Park. Meanwhile, Jamaica Scorpions captain Paul Palmer Jr., reacting to his side's loss to Windward Islands Hurricanes, said the batsmen need to capitalize on opportunities when it mattered. Volcanoes produced an admirable runs chase to easily brush aside Jamaica Scorpions by 5 wickets on the final day. Palmer hopes they will improve in their next round of action on Thursday.
We didn't bat as well as we should because on a difficult wicket for the first 2 days it was a bit difficult to bat on. I think we could have tried to muster up some more runs and to get even a bigger lead. Even 287 is a lot of runs, but we could have still pushed that over the 300 barrier. So that's something that we have to take into consideration to try and kill out games, to try and to kill it off from early.
Meanwhile, Windward Islands Volcanoes captain Kirk Edwards was pleased with his side's performance.
I don't think that it feels any different to any other win, but you know, winning is always a great thing. I thought the Scorpions, they played good cricket, probably dropped a few catches, but it was a tough game, as you guys would have seen, being around for the last 4 days. It was a great game.
And that's the sport. We'll be right back.
Caribbean Newsline is brought to you by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc.
Shower in the evening or take a fresh at night. Enjoy a warm shower with Solar Dynamics, you feel alright. Comfort, safety, temperature guaranteed. Long service fulfilling your every need. Take a shower in comfort, no more ouch with water touch you. Solar Dynamics is the best for you. Save on electricity, be environmentally friendly. Solar Dynamics is the one for you.
So we rely on journalists like you to tell us what's going on. So please tell us what is going on.
And that's quite an expectation. Maybe I will not be able to. Look, it's true. It's true that we are, when it comes to the struggle against Israeli domination and
Again, the major developments of this day, the Guyana government and opposition reached consensus on how the country should be governed, pending the outcome of the administration's court challenge to last month's no-confidence vote. And in sport, a former director of the Sports Company of Trinidad and Tobago found to have made unauthorized transactions with the cricket board to get a top coaching job. And that's Caribbean Newsline. For news and sport round the clock, subscribe to canonnews.com, and for more of our programming, log on to caribvision.tv and check out our YouTube channel. We'll be back here again tomorrow, but from all of us at CMC News, thank you for watching and have yourselves a good night.